Hi, it's me, an epic wizard, and I'm here today to talk to you about a game that is called Epic Wizardry. As you can see here, there is a free demo available on itch.io, and the full game is only $6, and it is very rare that I get sent a game on this show that I would recommend people just buy as is, because I am a game design wizard and people usually send me their games to critique them and try and make them better, but I didn't really have much critical to say of this game. I think it's really good. If you look at this image and you think, oh, that appeals to me, I like that little wizard going around doing wizard stuff, then you'll probably like this game. And you should just play it as it is. This is a series called Indies Under the Knife, where people send me indie games they've been making, and I, as a doctor of game design, cut them open and tell people what's wrong with them. So we're going to do a slightly different format today. I'm just going to sit down, play the game for a while, and chat and talk about what I like about the game, and occasionally I might give some suggestions of things I think the developer could do to make this game even better. They're not really criticisms, because I think this game is really good as it is already, and if I could wave my magic wand, which I could because I'm a powerful wizard, then I might change a few things about it, and I'll talk about them, and I'll also just generally muse about game design. So what I'm trying to say here is, if you want to hear a British man with a slightly monotone, maybe kind of relaxing voice talk about game design for a long period of time while he just dies in a game over and over again because he's not very good at it, then you come to the right place, because that is what this channel is all about. Hello, this is Epic Wizardry. Since ancient times, magical crystals have protected our world from the forces of evil. That's nice of them, isn't it? Where would we be without those magical crystals? But greedy kings wanted to enslave the power of crystals. In endless wars, the crystals were corrupted and destroyed, leaving our world unprotected. WASD to arrows to move, mouse to aim your magic, no need to click. Collect all the crystals, complete the level, avoid touching enemies and their bullets. The faster you collect the crystal, the more points you get for it. For every 20,000 points you get an extra life. Cool. I love this. This reminds me of the art of there's a dungeon synth artist I follow that has an album. They're called Witchbolt, and they have art that looks like that, and I love it. And it's not necessarily pixel art, I don't think, but it's that kind of 2 or 3 colours, very evocative. So yeah, we're just running backwards and forwards and picking up crystals, and when we do it, our weapon changes, which is a really nice touch, because you have to use the weapons slightly differently from each other. There we go. I've cleared the first level, just 4 crystals. Very satisfying. Doing exactly what I always ask people to do when they're making action games, which is give the player an easy win off the bat. You don't have to make your game easy, but if you want people to play your game and want to continue playing your game, you should make the beginning of your game easy. You know, sometimes it's not about having a really robust tutorial that takes you through everything step by step. It's just about making sure that people have fun in their first sort of 2 or 3 minutes of playing the game. Look at these guys. So I've got this kind of, do I rush for the crystal or do I try and take some dudes out kind of thought going on in my head. And one of the things I like about this game already is you've got those 3, I can see 3 enemies types, right? I've got bats, I've got mushrooms, and I've got purple slimes. And they all seem to be doing slightly different behaviour. Like the purple slimes, I know I'm supposed to be getting the crystal, but I'm just hovering and talking for a bit. The mushrooms have a single spore they shoot, and they kind of seem to move toward. Do they move towards me? Looks like it. The purple slimes stay away from me but shoot more projectiles. And I think a game of this nature, where the player is not actually doing much, is great to have sort of enemies to read or things to pay attention to, regardless of whether they're enemies or other types of hazards, which require a little bit of learning, and then you can gradually build up a picture of like how you should behave in a particular situation based on the kind of enemies or hazards you can see. and this is doing a really nice job of that. It's kind of immediately given me 3 different enemies. They're not difficult to deal with, but they are different. You know, each one has a kind of different way you should deal with it. And the slimes are particularly dangerous because they have several projectiles. Oh, mushroom got me. One little tiny UI thing, I think, is that the crystal thing up here, at a glance, when I'm trying to work out how much of the level I've got left, initially, I think seeing the 6 crystals is not as effective as, like, seeing something fill up, you know? Like a string of empty crystals that fill up, sort of like Zelda hearts in reverse or something like that. But again, that's the type of thing that I don't think is like a game-breaking thing, and it depends how high the crystals go. Because I imagine this has 10 crystals on an easy level or a medium level. I can't remember what I put it on. Then Nightmare mode is going to have loads and loads and loads. So maybe visually tracking an amount of crystals that you've collected won't be reasonable once it gets up to like 20 or 30, but so much character, these enemies. I really, really love them. And they could have got away with them sort of having one direction of sprites, but I think it really does give a lot of life that they sort of turn away, face the other way. Oh. It's funny that for a game that is so sort of challenging, you can't fall off. I kind of thought, you know, this game is quite mean. It's a little bit of a precision, not quite ragey, but a precision game. And I would think in a precision game, being able to fall off the edge would be an option, right? But you can't walk off there. I'm not saying I think you should be able to, but hey, maybe easy mode has a rail around there so you can see why you can't fall off, and then one of the harder modes removes the rail. So this one, we are just tracking the boss with the mouse. The thing, the controls in this feel kind of strange, but in a good way. Like, I find the maneuvering of aiming and kind of moving around with the WASD keys, it's kind of strange. It doesn't work exactly how I'd expect a twin stick shooter type thing to work. And you specifically can't play it with a gamepad at the moment, I don't think, which I think some people might want to. But because one of the powers is this lightning bolt thing, right? You're not. It's not relational to you. It's not like you're not moving it in a circle around you. You're just moving it wherever you want. And when you've got the fireballs out, that means the fireballs kind of come from your character. But when you're doing the lightning, it comes from, you know, wherever. I would like to see some more spells. I don't know how epic a wizard you are if you just have a lightning and a fireball spell, but maybe that's something that comes later on. I think to be honest, if I bought this, you know, if I bought this and I wasn't reviewing it, and I got, you know, 10 minutes into the game and I hadn't seen any other magic, I would probably be quite disappointed. I don't have any agency over that. It's just a thing that happens when I hit certain points in the game. But even just having that close-up melee thing is sort of changing how I move around the space a little bit. It's very nice. Oh, it was right at the bottom. Right, I'm gonna try and beat it this time without talking, because I obviously cannot talk and play a game of this nature at the same time. And anyone who's seen me stream will know that. On the boss battle, because you're no longer collecting crystals, the emphasis really changes to trying to clear as much of the play area as possible so that you've got space to move into when the big chungus comes for you. Because if you let everything get out of hand, like these things that they're growing, the boss is throwing these out. I say they because I don't know the gender of this tree, and there's no way to ask them either, so I'm just going to have to they them. But yeah, you kind of have to either be really good at dodging or deliberately clear the space out so you've got enough room to maneuver. It's very nice. Love it. It's very cute. Personally, these sort of like one-shot kill precision games are not really my bag because I am slow and old. And and I don't know, yeah, maybe it's a good genre for watching people play, but personally, just watching someone die and die over again because they're not concentrating because they're talking while playing is not good. Not a great sport to watch, I guess. I've seen a lot of conversation recently about the games you make should be good for streamers, and people sort of hitting back at that and sort of saying it's bad, but I've also been reading a book about Miyamoto from Nintendo and sort of how sort of in the early 80s when Nintendo was starting to build home systems after the Game & Watch and after arcade stuff, how there was always an emphasis on, you know, games that were good to watch. And so when people say that, oh, I don't want to have to think about if a game is good to watch on a stream kind of thing, just I would bear that in mind. I would bear that in mind that historically games have always been something that people watch someone else play, whether it's like taking turns on a console with your siblings or watching someone in an arcade play a game that you maybe like the look of but don't really want to do because it's too hard or whatever. Ooh. I haven't done this format for a while where I just cut together loads of reaction footage of me actually playing the game, but the game put me in a weird meditative state and I said loads of stuff about game design I don't even remember now, so it's not going to be very focused. It's not going to be a very focused, this is what you're going to learn. It's just here's a smart person who's got a PhD in being a wizard. Some of it's related to this game, some of it's very general and like talking about how this game is a good example of things I think other developers should do. And as I said, this game is great. If you like the look of it, if you like these very kind of precise like reaction precision games, then just go and get it. But if you do that and this is your first time on my channel, then please subscribe and like the video and leave yourself some kind of reminder to come back before you go and play it, because I will still be here doing my Epic Wizard stuff over here with my buddy here, Merlin. I love this art style. This really reminds me of some of what a lot of isometric games from I don't know, like the late 80s look like Nightmare, like kind of there were some games that looked like this on sort of the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad and stuff like that. I'm forgetting to collect the crystals. And they didn't have like these colors, they would be sort of monochrome, but this is so beautiful, and there's so much good visual design gone into this game, right? Like the forest levels that we saw a minute ago, the grass wasn't bright green, it was a sort of pastel green. It makes everything kind of easy to see what you're doing. And we've got, you know, an environment that's easy to see blue crystals in. Getting a couple of crystals come up at once, which is starting to lead to some interesting split-second decisions about what to prioritize. Oh. Glad it gives you that little warning symbol when you go to move into a space that an enemy is going to spawn into. They've really thought of lots of the things that could potentially be an issue with this game. It's really, really smart. A lot of attention to detail in the gameplay and the way that things are visually communicated. I really, really, really love this. And I am starting to see other spells, which is great, because that now, for me as a player, it's like you have seen that if you play a little while, you are rewarded with seeing what another spell does. And that now sets the precedent for me for, okay, I have a motivation here. I get to see different levels, I get to fight different types of enemies, and I'm going to unlock more spells. So although this doesn't have any element of choice, it's at least shown me that there is some progression with that in that regard, and it's going to kind of look and feel different. Because I think I've been playing a lot of Vampire Survivors clones since I did my videos on Vampire Survivors, and like trying to work out, you know, how different games do things differently and whether it works or not. Some of them just have too weak a differentiation between the different types of attacks. And it'll be nice to see if, you know, when we get a bit deeper into... Oh yeah, when I've got wind mode, I do have a haste as well. So that's a really interesting thing to have to suddenly react to. It's like, oh, I can move faster now, but also maybe I'm gonna run into something because my character is moving faster. So I like to see like the weapons in these types of games. Bearing in mind, in this one I'm not even selecting them, they're just randomly cycling for me, and the library's kind of getting bigger as we go through the game. I like to see them sort of feel different so that your aiming and movement has to respond to that in a different way. And the wind making your character go faster is really quite funny. And look, at the moment I've got a really helpful weapon. I've got the zapping. So now I'm thinking, oh, I'll clear out that area before I get this crystal, because when I get this crystal my power's going to change again, right? And yeah, if I had to take out all those knights with that fireball, that would have been a bit of a pain, whereas I could just stand on the other side. It's taken me a while to really lock in the fact that my power is going to change every crystal I get. And I like that feature. I think it's a good feature, because it's like tying together the changes of the weapons to your progression in a way that just makes the game really neat and tidy and kind of compact in all of the things it's doing. But it does take a little while to sort of get your head around what's going to happen. And I quite like the surprise of cycling through the weapons, but they're in a kind of standard order, and that makes me think maybe there should be like a next weapon icon, kind of like you get in Tetris, where you've got this is the next block you're going to get, or like when you've got a special thing saved in Mario or something. So when you collect a crystal, you sort of know immediately what mode you're going to switch into, because you can do it by memory, but I think it's kind of, it can be bad form to test memory in a game that isn't about memory, and this isn't a game about memory. This is about, you know, reactions and tactical maneuvering. So I think it would be nice to always know what my next spell is going to be. If we could see the spell just before you get it, then that will create a, oh my god, you know, I'm gonna get a new ability in a minute. I'm gonna get to try a new thing out. Oh, he spawned on me that time. I don't like that. I can happily recommend this as it is. There's nothing where I'm like, oh, this is, you know, broken or hard to understand or whatever. I can think of a few tiny tweaks that might make the experience better for me, but I really, really love everything about this so far. I was thinking, I think I have a bias towards sort of like strategy and slow games that are about judgment rather than quick reaction-based games, but I mean, this is a quick reaction-based game and I kind of love it. But I think maybe one of the qualities that this has that makes me like it, even though it is, you know, a reaction-based game and I'm a slow old man and often hate these type of games, I think one of the things that it has that makes me like it is a lot of the time you can see everything coming a mile off. And that really gives you the feeling that when you mess up, when you die, it's usually your own fault. And the only time when it felt not my fault was when I had an enemy spawn on me. And you do have these flashes for that. I think maybe that could be a little bit more prominent, of when an enemy is coming in and they're going to spawn on you. But I'm glad that is there. It's a good feature. It could just maybe be stand out a bit more, because we've got a lot of red in this level and it's a red warning. Look at these lovely candelabra and these little lovely bits of art around the edge. Look at all these floaty skeleton boys. Why are they here? And again, they've got different behaviours, right? Every enemy has a different behaviour. Also been thinking a lot about character design, because there's this sort of orthodoxy floating around at the moment, and there's a lot of anti-character driven action game talk at the moment, and I've seen Chris Sukowski talk about this a few times, where it's like, here are the genres that do well on Steam and here are the genres that don't, and the genres that don't are like character driven action games where you play one character and they move around in a world and there's a story and so on. And I really think that kind of seeing that as a what do people like, what do they not like on Steam is not a full or complete interpretation of the situation, right? Look at this, the slime splitting. He's like the Slay the Spire slime boss. That's great, I love that. But yeah, the point I was trying to make was, I think the genres that do poorly on Steam and other platforms are basically just the genres that people try to do the most, which are hard to do, right? So it's very easy to look at the data on Steam and say platformers do poorly, and it's like, well, platformers do poorly because there are certain things about making them that you have to do, and a lot of the platformers that get made are like people's learning projects, and they're just not very good. And I think one of the things that people are consistently not good at, even if they program a really good game, or potentially good game, is character design. And look at this wizard, he's great, he's such a little goofball. But sometimes you don't want a goofball, sometimes you want a cool character, right? But this wizard is cool because he kind of lets us know exactly what type of game this is going to be by looking at him. But when I talk about character design, I'm also talking about these enemies. And I think, like run-based, challenge-based games, the enemies are the main character, right? In terms of what is a symbol for your game. Think of Slay the Spire as a good example. I've been quite critical of, Slay the Spire's art style and world building. I find it a bit weird. It's kind of Adventure Time, but without the cute, just weird and often gross stuff in it. But the monster design in that game is strange and unusual and interesting, and above all memorable. And I think some of the monsters in that game could stand in for the whole game, right? You don't need to show people one of the player characters for them to know you're talking about Slay the Spire. And I think this game sort of has that quality to it, where a lot of the enemies that I can see they're like an interesting take on the thing, right? We see slimes in every game in a dungeon, but here's one with all these funny eyeballs. I do wonder if we're losing something by not having the kind of switching of your powers linked to collecting something anymore. Because that's such a core premise in the regular levels, and it gives you a degree of control. As you've seen earlier in the game, I was able to make choices about, I've got 2 crystals to pick up, and the current weapon I'm using is quite good for dealing with that situation over there, so I'm going to keep this until I've done that, You saw that a moment ago with the knights, but in the boss battles I don't have any agency over when the kind of weapon cycles, and that feels like something that is core to the game is then missing here. But maybe it would be too much to think about, because there is a lot to think about here. There's another thing I want to draw people's attention to. So if you're not super deep into making art or pixel art or any kind of illustration, actually, if you look at the way the outlines are used in this game and where there is and isn't a use of black, so the black outlines don't exist in the background information, right? And the black outlines only exist on the characters, or maybe some of the projectiles, but maybe the projectiles don't need it. And I think you can probably already imagine how much harder the game would be to sort of read and understand moment to moment if all of this stuff on the floor had black outlines on it. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to get away from thinking about like, what would the thing really look like, and think more about the purpose of each layer of the art. And if something is background information, like the texture on a wall or something, then that needs to be a kind of lower visual contrast than things that are dangerous, things that are rewards, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't watched my short video on information hierarchy in visual design for games, I'll put a link up to it on the description of this one. You can go watch that afterwards. It's a concept from graphic design that, you know, when you make choices about, you know, how something is colored, how it's stylized, how it moves, all of these things kind of dictate how much people would pay attention to it. And one of your roles as a game developer, or as a game artist if you're working on a team and you're doing all the visual stuff, one of your roles is to sort of think about how important specific parts of the game are for the player to pay attention to at any given time, and then make some of your stylistic choices based around that. And then having these kind of washed out, not black outlines on the things in the background in this game is an example of that. If you find any of this helpful, if you're watching this and thinking, oh, I wish there was more content like this, I wish I could hear people muse about game design without it always being about how to make $1 million with your Flappy Bird Endless Runner or whatever the snake oil of the season is, then please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. What I do isn't for a mass audience. As I say, most of the game dev content on here is very business focused, very marketing focused, where everything is very emotional and it's all about, oh, my journey as a developer. And it's like, mate, you just did 3 Unreal tutorials. You haven't designed anything yet. I know there are people out there who appreciate my sense of humor, even if most of the time it's just me saying things that I think are perfectly normal and then other people find them inadvertently funny because, I don't know, I have a British accent and the teeth to go with it. But what I'm trying to say is I was in academia until 2023. I came back out of academia to go back into working in games, making games in like free-to-play companies. I started doing this as a bit of a hobby to sort of help hobbyist developers with my design knowledge that I've accrued over the years, and I would love to be able to do this full-time or at least part-time, and every time someone donates to the Patreon, it makes that a little bit closer, a little bit more likely to happen. If you can't donate to the Patreon and become part of our Discord server, then just sharing what I do, word of mouth, like looking at the videos in my Indies Under the Knife series and finding ones that you find interesting, sending them to people that you know will find them interesting, that's going to help this channel to grow. And then I can get more money from AdSense, and then I won't have to, you know, debase myself dressing up or doing anything weird like that, because that would be weird, wouldn't it? Like, why would someone, you know, spend 10 years working in an industry, also get a PhD, you know, become a kind of academic in their field of game studies and in games education, and then go on YouTube and dress up as like some strange fantasy character, like just to try and get someone to give them $4 a month? It doesn't make sense. But then nowadays, what does? So I'm just in my second run through. I had to start the game from scratch because I couldn't play it all in one sitting before, and that's fine. I think it's okay to have, you know, NES style games where you have to do it all in one go. But one thing I've noticed is that when you die in this game, you get a break. You can go and get a drink, you can go to the toilet, there's a restart button, right? And this just hangs around and waits for you. But you don't get a prompt to start the next level, which means when you're succeeding, you have to keep going. And I would like to see a prompt when to go to the next level. It's a tiny little thing. It's not an exciting game design thing to think about. It's more of a UX thing, a user experience thing. But yeah, I think when you complete a level, you should have to click to proceed, just to allow people to go for a little break. Right, now I'm back up to the point that I didn't get to play from before. We've got some nice Dune-esque twangy music going on, and some nice spiders. Oh, and I do have another spell. I've got like a weird hex that stays on the ground. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm so happy to see that has kept up and we're unlocking more spells as we go through. So if you can't see, this is ground damage, and it hangs around on the floor for a while, but if I want to do max damage with it, I think I have to walk up quite close to the enemies. So again, this is really creating that dynamic of like, how long do I want to hold on to this weapon for? You're going to get a weapon that you think is like really good for dealing with the current situation or clearing some enemies, and then you might hold off picking up the next one because you don't want to lose that one. Such a good dynamic, so simple. And it kind of makes me think of something I've been thinking about a lot since I started this channel, is that the things that your player does aren't all button presses, right? They're not all like, oh, the player wants to jump, so I press the jump button, right? Because this game only has the mouse pointer and my direction of walking. But I am doing so much in my head in terms of perceiving and judging things. And when it comes to action games, I would love to see a bit more of that thinking from, you know, if you're watching this, you're making an action game, think about how many verbs that the player has that are an actual button, right? Like shoot or move. Something that's actually mapped onto the controller, and then think of how many verbs the player has that are like things that are happening in their head, because that tends to be the thing that makes a game really compelling. Obviously there are games where having lots of different moves you can execute by pressing different buttons and stuff. I don't know, I've been playing Dragon Age Veilguard because I will never skip a Dragon Age game. I'm a big fan regardless of you know, what people who are scared of pronouns think about that last game. And that has so many buttons and so many different abilities you can do, but they generally all amount to the same thing. So what you're doing is really, it's almost like playing a skateboarding game, right? It's like, I'm gonna kill this monster, but what combination of things am I going to use to do it? It's kind of expressive. When I play this badly, as you can see, there is so much more thinking going on because of the high stakes and the really restrictive way that the mechanics work together, right? I have to pick up the next crystal, but picking up the next crystal might deprive me of the weapon that I'm currently using, which is the best one to deal with the current situation. And that is a really great tension that goes a long way. And now I'm really happy to see that we are unlocking more magic as we go along, because that is kind of a driving thing for me, is like unlocking sort of secret things. You know, I really enjoy that. It's been my favourite thing with Vampire Survivors. I think that game does a fantastic job of having progress you can see coming, and then also having like hidden progress where you just get nice surprises. But now this game has set a sort of cadence or a rhythm for unlocks, so I don't know what the next spell is going to be, but I know that when I do get outside of the catacombs, if I'm able to get there in this session, that I am going to get another spell to play with, right? And that's going to change the way the game feels considerably again. All of these things adding up, like enemies that behave differently from each other, all of these things are adding up to put more of those like those actions that I'm taking as a player out of my hands and into my head. And I guess what I'm talking about, this idea of like judgment being a player action, isn't just for action games. To give you another example, if you were making a completely story-based game, you're making a visual novel or something, you can kind of design for sort of active player engagement by thinking about like what kind of mysteries are you creating, or what points of sort of what would I call it, sort of interpretive difference are you making in that story. If you think of a soap opera, like a TV soap opera, the way those things are structured is they have so many characters and subplots that, you know, audiences can have different favorite characters from each other, and totally different interpretations of a situation, right? And if you're making a very story-based game, you could maybe think about this problem in those terms. It's like, what in my game is there that people are going to have to interpret differently from each other? And that's not down to giving players things to do with their controller. It's not down to like necessarily having more dialogue options or anything like that. It's just down to having sort of situations that they're asked to interpret in some way. So yeah, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because 2025 is the year where I'm trying to put more of my time and energy into this, because, you know, quite frankly, a lot of you aren't making very good games, and you send them to me, and instead of making a video like this where I dress up as a wizard and tell you that your game is great, I have to make a video about how the game is rubbish and probably shouldn't have been made, and how you should rethink your life choices. And it's nice to not have to do that today, for once. I think one thing I might like to see, although this is probably exacerbated by the fact that we don't get a break between levels, but I think when we come into a new area like this, I think I'd like to see kind of an easier level at the start of each segment, so we get taught how the spiders and the boomerang skeletons and the eyeballs work before we're into like a big slog where, you know, that was a 25 crystal level, this is a 35 crystal level. I think when we go into a new section with new things to learn, it would be nice to just drop that down to like 10 for the first one or something, just so that the kind of learning how the new enemies and the new power operates sort of has its own little space first before we're back into the regular difficulty curve of the game. Whoops. Flying eyeballs in games might be the best sort of ratio of effort to freakiness. Right? If you want a really low effort way of making your game feel freaky, you just need that flying eye in the sky.